All right, here we go. We're going to get started. So, what we're going to cover today, we are going to debunk some common negotiation myths. We're going to discuss the difference between negotiating a job offer versus a promotion. We'll talk about negotiation prep strategies, some techniques that you can use, how to follow up post-negotiation, and a few other tips that will help you basically prepare for when you go to negotiate either your job offer or an internal promotion at your current employer. But we're going to start off with a brief activity. I want to get y'all warmed up, so I'm going to give you 2 minutes. And this activity is pretty straightforward. I just want to gauge your comfort level in negotiation right now. So there's 5 questions. It's very easy scoring. Just take 30 seconds, 60 seconds to kind of do a quick assessment, see where your comfort level is. These questions may also help you formulate some questions that you might want to address toward the end. And if you're just jumping on, feel free to drop in the comments where you're joining from. And if you have a favorite cold beverage, then drop that in too, because I'm needing some inspiration. I'm drinking clear, bubbly water today, but I'm looking for some other bougie mocktails for the afternoon. All right, probably everyone's in good shape. Is there anyone who feels uber confident about their negotiation skills? I assume if we're all here, we're here because there's always an opportunity for us to learn and grow. But some of you may be more well-versed in negotiation than others, depending on where you're at in your career. I just wanted to give you all a sense of kind of where you stand. And by the end of this, if you come back and do this assessment, you should have a much higher level of understanding of how to negotiate, some techniques that you can pull forward and step forward with much more confidence than prior. All right, so I want to go over some stats. People love numbers, and I think it's really important for you guys to see these things. For one thing, there are some compelling reasons why you should negotiate. And the first one, the statistic really spoke to me, is a study by JobBite that was done a few years ago, found that 83% of job seekers who tried to negotiate their pay were actually able to secure higher pay. 83%. Now, on top of that, a third of them received 10% or more of a raise. Now, those of you who are used to those crappy 3% raises, wouldn't you want to stick your neck out a little bit and score a 10% raise? Think about what you could do with that extra income. So some other things to compel you, if that one's not compelling enough, women, as you know, are earning less than men. Right now, currently, the gap is the closest it's ever been, but we're still hovering between 13 to 17% less. So that's one reason. If you are a minority, Latinas and Black women, the pay is even less for those ethnic groups. To add insult to injury, let's just pretend we're all 20 years old today. Woo! Okay. If we're 20 years old and we are starting our career, you will make $500,000 less than your male counterpart over 20 years. How does that make you feel? I'll tell you how it makes me feel. It makes me feel like, dang, I'm going to go ask for more money because I'm clearly underpaid. Now, if you're in sales, which I know probably a few of you are here in MedTech, then you should know that about 3/4 of B2B sales pros met or exceeded goals. This is women, B2B sales reps actually met or exceeded goals versus only 63% of men. So not only are women underpaid, but we're actually in a lot of roles demonstrating that we ought to be probably paid more in some cases. And then lastly, and this may not surprise you, if you are in a commission position, men are typically earning 25% more annual sales commission than their female counterparts. Yeah, so that's why we're all here today, right? I want to kind of get the blood flowing, get you motivated, understand why this is so important. And I also want to go over why women in particular need to negotiate. One of them, of course, is the gender pay gap. Another is financial security. And I don't want to get like, too down in the dumps or anything, but even if you are in a secure relationship and you have multiple household incomes, there's no way of ever predicting if something's going to happen. Not that anything tragic is going to happen, but sometimes people lose jobs, the spouses break up, there are things that happen. You must take financial responsibility for yourself as a woman. Future opportunities. If you negotiate now with your pay or you negotiate your internal promotions, that is going to open doors in the future for additional opportunities. You take a jump here, then that gets you closer to here, right? So negotiating gives you the power to really make these transitions and grow professionally and personally. If you're into generational wealth, which who isn't? Now, I literally actually had a woman tell me a couple weeks ago that she didn't really care how much she made because her husband just got a really hefty promotion. And I was like, girl, if you don't have a place to spend that money, I can think of some ideas for you. If you are financially secure, that is awesome. And you should feel really good about that. But there are a million things that you could do with your income if you are suddenly finding yourself in a comfortable position. Building generational wealth is certainly one of them. Donating your money. If you're still having trouble after that, come see me and we can spend it together. Another reason to negotiate is just empowering each other as women. And as well, like we all need to be helping each other. And one of the things that's really important to me as a career professional is I work with women who are not only on the rise, but they're bringing other women up along with them. Negotiating your pay is paving the way for other women to do it as well. So that's another reason. And then increased perception of your value. This seems silly, but think about it. If you position yourself to make $50,000 more than what you're making, you are perceived to be more valuable just based on that alone. You're also in the process of negotiating, making a rationale or justification for why you should get paid more. Just the process or the act of reviewing your accomplishments and achievements is going to increase people's perception of your value or benefits to an organization. I'm going to pause there, take a sip of water. And also just open the door. If you do have a question, feel free to drop it in the comments or raise your hand and we can address it on the fly. All right, let's talk some myths because these are some things that I hear out of women's mouths, men's mouths as well. First one, women aren't good negotiators. Well, I beg to differ. In fact, women oftentimes just choose not to negotiate for a variety of different reasons. That does not mean they're not necessarily good negotiators. They just typically don't do it as often as men. And typically it's often because women tend to underestimate their value as an employee, whereas that is less common with men. Not always, but is sometimes the case. Sometimes people think they're going to get a raise just because they've earned it or deserve it. Gals, I know we all deserve a raise. Inflation's gone through the roof. I know you're all hustling, but if we do not advocate for ourselves, we will not get the recognition, the honors, the awards, and the pay raises that we actually deserve. And you have to be able to articulate the value that you bring and able to do that. Just being on the floor at work is not going to be enough. Another thing I hear is, oh, I should just be grateful that I got an offer. An initial offer is something to be excited about and to celebrate. However, it's not the first and it's not the final offer. It is an initial offer and a jumping off point. So even though you should be grateful for the job offer, know that it's not the end game. Some women think that they're going to be seen as aggressive if they negotiate. Oftentimes society discourages us from being assertive as women, or that it could be seen as unfeminine or unbecoming, but it is a skill that has to be developed. And even if you're not advocating or negotiating on your behalf, chances are you're going to have to negotiate in your personal life or on behalf of someone else, in which case these skills are still going to benefit you regardless. Another fear that people have sometimes is that an offer will be rescinded or retracted. Now, while this does happen on occasion, it is the rare occasion. And just to give you a sense of the scope of what the expectations for negotiating are, there are a lot of statistics out there that indicate that nearly 3/4 of recruiters and hiring managers expect candidates to negotiate. So if you're not you are absolutely underselling yourself and you're leaving money on the table. And then the last myth that I hear quite often is that only salary can or should be negotiated. Not true. There are many, many benefits that can be negotiated. We're actually going to talk about what some of those are so that you have a better sense of how you should prioritize the elements of your compensation package that you want to negotiate, ensuring that you get the most important parts of that package in hand, right? Okay. Let's talk about the difference between job offers and promotions, because there are some nuances between these two. Now, a couple things just to keep in mind is the leverage that you have in these two different situations. If you are a candidate who is new to the organization, you may have leverage such as an existing job, or you may have other job offers that you can use as leverage. Whereas if you are going for an internal promotion, your leverage is basically the value that you've proven to showcase at the organization. So you have a little bit different leverage. You might also have job offers that you could use, but more likely you're going to fall back on what you've already been able to demonstrate your strengths are in. In terms of risk taking for negotiation, job offers for external positions tend to be a little bit riskier. The offer could potentially be rescinded, although that is pretty rare. Whereas if you're an internal candidate, obviously the risk is much lower because you're already currently employed at that organization. You have probably some sense of security in that role. Bargaining power. The new company wants you. Once a company wants you, that's when you're in the seat to negotiate. So that gives you a lot of power. Whereas, bargaining power, again, an existing organization is the proven value that you've already brought to the table. Negotiation elements are different. Here's a couple things to keep in mind. When you're looking at an internal promotion, more than likely, you're just going to be negotiating your salary. You could potentially be negotiating an annual bonus, maybe a commission rate cap or something to that effect. But basically that would be the main things. Whereas with an initial job offer, you're looking at a full package. So healthcare benefits, equity potentially, and stock options, 401k, the whole shebang. So you need to look at the much broader package instead of just salary ranges. And we'll go over some of those things too. We'll go through everything in super detail because I will have this slide deck presentation available for you to reference. But the other thing to keep in mind is the way that you're leveraging your relationships. Internally, you're going to have some established relationships. You're going to know a little bit about company politics, which gives you an upper hand. You probably even have some internal sponsors that can speak on your behalf, which is really important. When you're looking externally for a new job, you probably don't have established or at least established long-term relationships with the recruiter and hiring managers. So there are some more unknowns and you probably won't get as many like insider insights as you would with an internal promotion. All right, so what I'm going to walk you through briefly is what I call a 3-step negotiation prep. These are the 3 things you need to do. If you can do these 3 things, you're going to be in great shape. This will prepare you for an effective negotiation session. Now, I've included some links that you can access that will give you information about knowing your market value. The first thing you need to do is know how much you're worth in the marketplace. And there are a variety of places that you can get that information. One that is specific to the medical field is MedReps. I believe that's mainly sales, but they have some decent resources around salary ranges as well as the job market and future opportunities. Salary.com, Glassdoor, MyPlan, these are all really great places to identify salary ranges for the position that you're either currently in to understand where you sit now, or to get a better understanding of what the position should pay that you're applying for now or in the future. And then one other place that you can find out, there's actually a couple places. If you're having informational interviews, which I highly suggest if you are job searching, that you're networking with potential colleagues, hiring managers, recruiters in those informational interviews, it is acceptable to ask for a salary range. For example, let's say you are a sales rep and you're talking to a potential sales colleague at XYZ Inc. And you say, hey, can you just give me a sense for a range for someone who comes in and starts selling X product for XYZ? And ask for a range. Don't ask for a specific number. It makes people uncomfortable. And it still may make the person on the receiving end a little uneasy because people are uncomfortable talking about pay. But guess what? If we want to get anywhere, there needs to be more salary transparency. And if you ask in a way that gives people an opportunity to give a larger range, you're more likely to get an answer. You can also call HR at the company that you're applying for. It's an acceptable thing to do. You could ask the recruiter or hiring manager, of course, but you may wish to look elsewhere before you address that with them because you're going to want to have a solid number in mind. Let me show you what a salary range looks like. This is one way you can establish this. This is important. Okay, what a lot of people do is they go too low. So for example, let's say your salary position that's on the job posting is between 130 and 160K. Well, your target income is, let's just say your target is 150. So that means because 75% of recruiters are anticipating that you are going to negotiate, that I would go at least 10% higher. So there's some wiggle room. And that sets a higher base number to start from because they're going to go negotiate down. So if you go a little bit higher in a range than where they're at, they can come down and you'll both be in a similar ballpark number. So that's something to keep in mind. And even drawing out a graph like this can be really helpful just to have that visual and get a better sense of the numbers that you should be throwing out there. And a range is key. Do not pigeonhole yourself to a $20,000 range. I would, especially the more you make, the larger that range is going to be. So make sure that you allow some room for negotiating. Step 2. You need to understand the job market. And again, there are a few resources that you can leverage. One of them is BLS.gov. Let me see if I can show that to you. Oh yeah, here it is. So the US Bureau of Labor Statistics has a great occupational outlook handbook. This one is specific to wholesale and manufacturing sales, which would be like medical devices potentially. But this gives some insights around median pay, work environments, job outlooks, state and area data, and similar occupations. You can also look at ONET online. These links are on that slide. It'll give you, there's a keyword search, so you can just search for your role, and there's all sorts of information and resources that'll give you a better sense of what you should be commanding in those roles. Step 3 is knowing what to negotiate for. We touched on negotiating elements outside of salary. While salary generally is the main component of your compensation, it's not the only one. And if you rely on that as the sole source of your negotiation, you're going to be missing out on opportunities. The other thing is, think about this. If you want a 50K salary increase, you should ask for that, probably even go a little bit higher than that, and maybe 3 other things that aren't as important to you. Because if they're looking to negotiate down, instead of negotiating the salary down right off the bat and saying, no, we won't give you 50, but we'll give you 30, they may look at those more ancillary benefits that you've also asked for and say, well, we can do the salary, but we can't do an additional week of PTO. So ask for more than what you're really seeking, because you're going to need some leverage. You're going to need some stuff on the table that can be taken away as part of the negotiation process. If you've ever been through a divorce, this should come very naturally for you. All right. So things to negotiate: stock options or equity, commission rates, bonuses. That could be a sign-on bonus. It could be an annual or quarterly bonus. You could ask for additional PTO. A lot of companies now are even shifting to models where you could negotiate after 2 or 3 years. I get a month-long sabbatical, so that's something else that you could ask for. You can even request flexible schedules or remote work environments or a hybrid situation. Most of us who, I don't know about your industry, but probably a lot of you worked from home during COVID, the pandemic, and so became accustomed to not having to commute, having some extra time, being able to be more efficient and being able to multitask, maybe balance with your personal life. That's something that you can negotiate. So if that's important to you, I would make that something of a priority as part of your negotiation talks. And then another element you can also negotiate is even professional development, tuition reimbursement. There are a myriad different benefits that you can negotiate. Now, one thing I include a link to in the slide deck, and I realize, hopefully you should still be able to see my screen, is I have this compensation spreadsheet, and you have access to it. If you get a hold of the presentation slides, which I'll make sure you have access to, you can download and edit this particular slide for this spreadsheet. This allows you to lay out your entire current or most recent compensation package, and then you lay out job offers that you get. And it's a real easy comparison tool to understand where you stand. And then you can go through and even prioritize by color coding so that you can really have a quick visual to help you navigate where you want to negotiate. So you'll have access to that if you want it. Now we're going to do another quick activity. I want everyone to take a few minutes and maybe I'll pause the recording. We'll take 5 minutes or maybe 3 or 4 minutes, and I want you to either go on Glassdoor, PayScale, Salary.com, ONET Online, MyPlan, BLS.gov, any of those sites, and just do a quick 2-minute search and look for your role or the most similar role you can find, and look and see what the ranges are. If you go to Salary.com, I believe they in particular will allow you to even get nitty gritty as to where your region is, what your seniority level, what your education level is. You can get pretty nitty gritty in getting a more targeted range for your salary. So take a couple minutes just to do that. I'm going to pause the recording and then we'll regroup in just a minute. So I won't out anyone and make you disclose whether, you know, what your salary range is, but I am curious to know if anyone was surprised by what they found. You don't have to necessarily say I'm underpaid or overpaid. I am curious to know, is it in line with what you thought it would be, or was it a surprise? Are you learning something new? Feel free to drop in the comments, and then we will move on to some strategies. But I just wanted to give you a sense of where you should be looking and give you an opportunity to, you know, take a look and see what it's all about. So it only takes you a few minutes to do this kind of research, and the more nitty gritty on the role you can get, the more closely you can get. Everything comes in way lower than made early on. Well, that's good. Okay, commission-based, yeah. Yeah, it's a little trickier, I think, when you're commission-based to find solid numbers. Yeah, really hard to compare. In that case, that's when conversations with your peers, candid conversations with people you feel like you can trust, you have a rapport with, that's when those conversations become important. And I know it can feel uncomfortable to talk about those things, but the last job let me give you an example. So I left a corporate job that it was kind of a toxic work environment for you. I'm sure a lot of you can relate. And I didn't have a job lined up. And so I had a salary in mind and I was going to go for it, but I had some inside information. I had a couple former colleagues that worked at the organization, and I asked them, I said, you know, I'm thinking about asking for $80,000 base salary outside of my commission. You know, is that kind of in line with what you're making? And he's like, no, you need to ask for at least 20K more. And I did, and I got it. And so and I ended up basically almost like increasing my salary by 30% from my prior job. But if I had not asked that person right off the bat, I would have lost $20,000. So I think that having those conversations, while difficult, is something to have a conversation about. Someone put in a question in the chat box. How do you transition from a commission-based discussion to convert to a salary? Ooh, how do I weigh my worth in a different structure setup? I think the place to start is if you can ask for something, a base salary that's close to what you make in commission, you've already demonstrated that you have the skills. I think it's really demonstrating that you will continue to put in the same amount of effort and that they can expect the same type of results, even if you're on salary. And I think the other thing is, if they're not willing to move to salary and you really need to have that structure, that financial security and stability, then it might be time to consider something different, because it is hard to get an employer to change from a commission only structure to salary. So that is a bit of a trickier one. That's really where you're gonna. Oh yeah,
Kate, too, a lot of the some people on the call are 1099s, so it is different when you go to a corporate setting. So I would say about 75% of what you make would be probably your salary, and then the rest would be commission based, especially when you're a salesperson. But I would definitely, look for uncapped commissions, because a lot of times when you're making really good money as a distributor-based rep and you go to corporate, they try to cap your commissions,
yes.
which is always tough, and you have unlimited income capability when you are a 1099.
Yeah, that's I'm glad you bring up that distinction, Lisa. That is an important thing to keep in mind, is if you are in sales, is asking about commission rates, when they pay out, how long you've had to be in the company and how frequently they pay out, and if there are caps. Those are things you absolutely want to know. The other thing that's sort of related to that is what happens when an account cancels. I worked a corporate job where if an account canceled, that counted against my quota. So even though I was selling X above what I needed to, if I lost an account, it just got cut off my total number. So those are things that you want to make sure you know ahead of time. Another person asked about variability with smaller startup companies. That's when you can start having conversations about potentially getting equity in an organization. Startups, those are a little bit trickier too. They tend to pay a little bit more competitively, but in a smaller startup, you're probably going to wear a lot of different hats too. So dang it, you're going to earn that money. So that's one thing to think about. I would do a lot of research on what similar companies are paying out to get a better sense. And again, you're probably going to want to have some conversations with peers to get a better sense of what that looks like. Yeah, that's also something that might be better too for a further conversation. Ooh, negotiating severance is a good one. We're not going to be able to cover that one probably today, but at the end, if there's some time, we can talk about that. But the one key thing to know about severance, you need to negotiate it when you get hired. That is key. If you don't do that, it's going to be really difficult to get your employer to give you anything. And I know a couple people personally who are going through difficult situations because they did not have severance. They did not have severance negotiated at the get-go, and now they're in a lawsuit trying to fight for a year's worth of their pay after going through a really difficult workplace and situation. So make sure that you're bringing that up in advance. Generally, severance negotiations are taking place when you're a higher level seniority, but it can certainly come up in other positions as well. But make sure that you're addressing that at the beginning. All right, so some negotiation strategies. We talked about doing your research. Homework is super important. Make sure you walk in knowing what you should be paid. And this means also knowing anything that's on the company website. If you get a job offer, make sure that before you walk into a negotiation conversation, that any of the questions that you have, that those answers can't be found on their website, social media, or some other type of resource. Because if you walk into a negotiation conversation and are asking questions that could easily be answered by an online resource or a person in a quick email, then you're going to come looking like you're ill prepared, and that maybe you're not always prepared in conversations or meetings or discussions in your professional life in general. Practicing is huge. One tip I'll give you, there's a really cool free application out there called Udly. I'm going to throw it in the chat. Oh, I think it's Udly AI. It's a free app right now. It's super cool. It's an AI platform that allows you to practice speaking. So if you present regularly at sales meetings, it's a great way to practice. If you're speaking in front of groups, but it tells you how many filler words, ahs you use. It'll tell you based on the type of conversation you're having, if you're speaking too fast or too slow. So that can be a great way to practice. Make sure you're thinking about the whole package. Remember that compensation comparison spreadsheet that I showed you? Use a tool like that to lay out the entire package so that you have a very clear understanding of what's on the table, what you've had in the past, and what you need moving forward. Another piece of this that's huge, and this is a whole nother workshop, is really understanding and articulating the value that you bring to an organization. This means using a methodology such as STAR or XYZ, which you're basically saying, here's a situation I was in, here is the problem I need to solve, here's how I did it, and here's the end result. Those are the types of stories you need to tell in order to justify the salary you're asking for. If you can't provide results, and especially quantifiable results based on your performance, it's going to be very difficult for you to justify why you're getting paid more. I can't emphasize this point again enough. Don't undersell yourself. This is your chance to advocate on your own behalf. It's very empowering to negotiate as well. So don't feel uncomfortable asking for what you believe you can based on feeling like you're going to be seen as aggressive or dominating, whatever. And then throughout this whole process, this is also very important, is make sure that you're expressing enthusiasm, right? You're excited. We're talking about a job opportunity. It's not just the dollar bills. While that is a crucial component of your work, the work that you're going to be doing, the position that you're going to be filling, hopefully is exciting to you. So make sure throughout the process that you continually reinforce that you're excited about the opportunity, the reasons why you think you're a great fit, to show them that you are invested in their organization and to the role in the team. A big piece, and this is a negotiating tip, regardless of whether you're negotiating a job offer, a house, any kind of money transaction. Try not to be first. Usually being first is great. Being first in a negotiation is not great. Remember how we talked about setting the bar, right? If you set the bar too low, or you set the bar first, you don't know if that recruiter was going to come in higher or lower than you, but they're going to come in lower now. So the idea here is when salary comes up, which is generally when they told you that they want you to come work for them, this is when, instead of giving them a range, you ask them to give it. So they say, Kate, how much are you looking to make in your next position? And I say, instead of, I'm looking to make 100 to 130, I want to know where they stand. If it's not on the job posting, I need to get a sense of where they're at. Instead, I say, I'm really excited about the opportunity, but until we have a few more conversations about the scope and scale of the role and the responsibilities I'll have, I need a little more information to be able to give that salary range. Do you think you could provide me with a range that is traditionally associated with a role like this at X company? So you're trying to turn it around and get them to give you a baseline first, and then you can come over the top of that. Is it the end of the world if you throw out a number first? No, but just try not to be the first person to negotiate, because usually the person who negotiates first is not the winner of the negotiation. Again, provide justification, express flexibility. You can't have it all. As much as everyone likes to think that they can, you really can't. So show that you're willing to be flexible, that you have some options, that you're not being, standing too firm, because no one wants to work with someone who's rigid and can't, be flexible. While it's uncomfortable, silence is very powerful in negotiations. if after starting your initial or your counter offer, just wait, just stop talking, give your range, and then just shut up and wait. Because oftentimes if there's a pause, people get nervous, they don't like it. So they'll start talking and they'll say whatever's on their mind. And sometimes they may divulge something that's helpful for your negotiation. They may make a concession that they might not otherwise, but because people are uncomfortable with silence, a lot of times they're willing to fill that silence with information that can be helpful to you. Again, start with a higher range because 70 to 75% of recruiters are expecting you to negotiate. So make sure you set a high anchor to negotiate from, and then be patient. And this is one of the hardest things. Being patient is so hard in many areas of our lives, but don't take the first offer. Even if they say, we never make concessions, negotiate. There's always room to negotiate. If they want you to work there bad enough, they will make it happen. And if they can't make it happen, they will let you know, but don't accept the first offer. You at least need to counter, and don't be afraid to ask for, don't be afraid to ask questions or to ask for extra time if you need to be able to think it over and compare with your other job offers or current salary. Bunch more tips. Some of these things we covered. You want to make sure you have a walkaway number. Your walkaway number should be based on your budget. What do you need to survive? What do you need to be comfortable, and then some? You really need to establish what that number is before you start job hunting, because otherwise you find yourself in a situation where you're not making enough money, or you become resentful because you're not being compensated with what is commensurate with your role. For negotiating in a remote world, it's definitely preferred to negotiate over the phone or even over Zoom versus via email. And there's a lot of reasons for that, right? I like Zoom. It's not as awkward as being in the same room as someone when you're negotiating, but you can still see someone's facial expressions, how they're reacting, the tone of their voice. So having a conversation where you're negotiating over the phone, where you can hear someone's inflection in their voice, is going to be more effective. And it's also going to accelerate your negotiation because you're able to have a dialogue that's ongoing as opposed to sending an email, waiting 3 days to get an email back. So make sure that you are aiming to use the phone or Zoom instead of email if possible. And my favorite question that I think you'll all benefit from is an open-ended question that is beautiful for negotiating. When you throw something out and they're like, I don't know if we can do it, ask, what kind of flexibility do you have? Now, don't say, can you do it? That's a yes or no question. You're probably going to get a no. But if you say, what kind of flexibility, or what are our options here? That gives some space to come up with some creative ideas. And it also forces them to come up with an idea. So asking what kind of flexibility or what options are available is a great way to continue opening the door to negotiations and moving it in your favor. And then when you're preparing for negotiations, one thing that I recommend, and this is also helpful before a job interview or before a big date, whatever you've got going on that you might be nervous about, is just meditate, chill out for a hot minute, take a few deep breaths. I like box breathing. 4 counts, 4 count in, 4 count hold, 4 count out, 4 count hold. Easy way to regulate your breathing and just mellow out. This will calm you before you negotiate. Also probably make you feel a little bit more confident because you've pushed all the other external things out of your mind and are focused on the task at hand, which is negotiating. And then always keep in mind, negotiating a job offer or a promotion isn't personal. This is a business transaction. You are doing work for a company and they are compensating you. It is not a reflection of who you are as a person, what your value is as a human being. It is simply a business transaction. So make sure that you keep that in mind as well. And then post-negotiation, pretty straightforward. Make sure that you're getting everything in writing. This is critical because the last thing you want to do is put in your notice because you have a verbal offer and then it doesn't come through, or the full terms don't come through with a full package. Make sure you're sending thank you notes. I still like one by mail or email. I think it's a really nice thing to do. People like to know they're appreciated, that they gave their time for an opportunity, that you're grateful for it. Make sure that you're taking adequate time to review the offer and compare it to your current or last package. Make a decision on whether you graciously accept or decline, and then make sure you're wrapping things up. You need to continue that relationship. If you don't take the offer, keep the relationship positive, because you never know if there'll be an opportunity down the road. If you accept the offer, ask when you can start meeting the team. Ask what you can do to start the onboarding process. And then one thing that we often fail to do when we start a new endeavor is, or we've celebrated something as, or excuse me, we've achieved something, is we forget to celebrate. We forget to reflect. And I think that's one thing that's really important, is even after you close a sale, or you do a big presentation, or you get a job, reflect on what went well and what you can learn from and apply to future negotiations, because it's going to make you a stronger negotiator in all areas of your life. So that's one thing that I would also recommend, is just being very reflective. So, quick recap. Ladies, you've got to negotiate it. It's critical to closing the gender gap. Make sure you do research about what your market value is. You need to know the job market itself and future opportunities. Make sure you have a list of what you want to negotiate for and prioritize those things. Don't be the first to give a number. Make sure you can articulate the value that you bring through accomplishments and stories. And then don't forget to continue on with those relationships to open the doors for future opportunities. That wraps up. We covered a lot of information. I know that was like probably drinking from a fire hose. So if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the comments, raise your hand. I am happy to share my time with you. If you have a question that maybe you want to ask privately, or maybe something comes up, tomorrow, I'm willing to share 30 minutes of my time to do a complimentary consultation. You can take a look at your resume, talk about a job offer, whatever would be helpful for you at this time. The link is up on the screen. I also have the compensation negotiation worksheet that I showed you, and it's editable Excel version on stan.store for career. And I'll also make sure that to get Brandy and Lisa the workshop presentation slides, so that y'all can take a look at those too. And I have to do a shameless plug, because I have something I think that might interest some of the people here. Is I'm doing another event on the 18th of August at noon, and it's called Career Couture: How Your Style Can Set You Up for Success. So come to that, figure out what your signature style is, figure out your interview and negotiation outfits, and then go negotiate your job offers. You will be in tip-top shape. So shameless plug, if you want to get the link to that, it's on my LinkedIn page. I'm happy to have you join. If anyone has questions, take the floor.
I think, Kate, thank you so much. That was such great information. We're getting amazing feedback. So thank you again for your time. But everyone, yeah, and I know that everyone's, I think, dropping off now from going back to lunch, going back to work. Or, yeah, but thank you again. And we have a lot of others very neat webinars and events coming up in the future. So love having Kate be a member of our teams and broaden that horizon. And we'll be sending some emails and text messages with new events coming up. So thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kate. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
So glad y'all
Thank
enjoyed.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.